everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cup Interviews. My name is Jillian Robinson, your associate producer, and today we have a fabulous interview in store. I am so excited. Our interviewee has been a role model and inspiration for me over the last few years and continues to flood our stages with his brilliance and grace and humility. I am honored to say we have André Sills joining us today. André, how are you doing?
Good. Pleasure to be here. Glad to have this time to have a chat with you. And yeah.
Of course, we're so lucky to have you. So let's jump right in. So of course, we'll start with our icebreaker. What's in your cup today, André? What are you sipping with us?
Well, I won't open it right now since it's earlier on in the day, but something I just found recently that was actually very, very tasty and delicious. Give a little plug right now. Collingwood Freestyle Double Chocolate Milkshake Porter.
Okay.
And I just realized yesterday that it's a limited release, so I'm gonna have to go and get some more before they take it off the shelves.
Is that in the LCBO?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was delicious. I don't know. I guess as soon as it starts to get a little cooler, I kind of like dark beers and stouts. During the summertime might be something different. But yeah, I guess as the weather is changing, like I've had one can of that so far. So after I had that, I was like, gotta get some more.
Yeah,
Like everything in me not to drink it last night, but just to have it available to talk about it today.
Yeah, I'm a huge craft beer connoisseur myself too, and I do like to segue to the stouts and porters as the air gets crispier.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorites is a chocolate peanut butter porter back in my hometown of Windsor. It's Craft Heads Brewery.
Okay.
Really tasty.
Chocolate peanut.
Anything with
peanut
chocolate to do with a stout or a porter, I am all in. So I guess I'm kind of on the sort of baked good train as a drink as well. I have a cinnamon black coffee going today with my
Nice.
fall-oriented mug. I'm finally feeling folly, so thought I would indulge in that today.
Nice.
Perfect. Okay, well, great. So, tell us about yourself, André. Like, how did you get into theater? Yeah, all the things.
Well, I guess for me, it started pretty early. And I guess as any sort of R&B singer starts off, they usually start off in the church. And I kind of had the same story. Not a singer. My younger sister is a singer. She's an opera singer. You can look out for her, Jillian Sills. But yeah, that's another story. She's blowing up the scene. Yeah, I guess the church that we went to as a kid, it was in Scarborough. It was a big church. And they did Christmas and Easter productions every year. So I remember the first time I saw one of the productions, and I was probably 6 or maybe even younger. And I've told the story before where I see this particular Easter production, this kid runs into the arms of Jesus, picks him up, and they both raise their hands in the air. I was like, I want to do that. And then the next year it was me. And then I just kind of caught the bug and I wanted to do more. And I guess throughout elementary school into high school, I was doing a lot of that and doing some stuff at the school, at high school as well. And, coming to the time when you graduate, trying to figure out what you want to do. I think the acting world was really just calling out to me, and thankfully I had parents who were supportive, and as they have 2 out of the 5 kids who are in the arts. And but they said, if you're going to do it, you got to go get your training. And I went to George Brown, did their 3-year program. So I guess that's how I kind of got started, was the planting the seed in my head as a kid of seeing, I guess, the essence of what theater can do from a very young age. So, I guess that's how I caught the bug and have continued to want to do more and continue to challenge myself. And, so
Great.
love it.
I I love that. I love hearing an origin story. See where we all come from, what inspired us, what sort of blasted us off to where we are now. It's so great. So great to hear. So speaking of theater, on a more recent note, you just played Bottom for A Midsummer Night's Dream at Stratford this past summer. So that's Stratford, along with some other theater companies, bringing theater back to a live setting. And it was an outdoor performance, but still it was bringing us back into the live sphere. So what was that experience like, character-wise, or even just the fact of coming back to live performance after post-lockdown?
Well, it's so funny because there's so many parts in the canon that I never thought I'd get an opportunity to play, like Coriolanus, and then this past year, Bottom. And I remember when that particular offer came, I was like, because I've done the show before. I've played Oberon. I've played Snug the Joiner, and yeah. So this was the first time where, taking a look at Bottom, his part or his particular journey, really for the first time in trying to figure out, as I say, what his journey is. What is it about this man that needs to be changed? And yeah, because I guess in my history of being in the show, seeing the show, I always just remember Bottom being funny, show's done. And I was like, is that all it is? And, the whole journey through this particular production was, the word I keep using for this past summer or the year plus of COVIDness is interesting. It's loaded. It's neither good nor bad. It could be good or it could be bad. But like we had quite the journey of being the first show back at Stratford. And, we were set to start rehearsals in May, and right before we started rehearsals, Ontario released the 3-step unlocking plan. So we started off on Zoom, and for actors out there, you mentally prepare to start something on a particular date, and it's not just in your mind, but your body is ready to go. So like our first couple of days, I was in a mental and physical mess because the body is like, this isn't what we signed up to do, and the brain's like, okay, let's take some time. We have some time to mind the text and all that sort of stuff, but the body's still wanting to go. And then we ended up spending like 3 weeks on Zoom, so that was a lot. And then, because we weren't allowed to be in person as of yet. And then when we were allowed in person, was just all the protocols that were thrown at us and we got tested 3 times a week, which was great, and a great thing that we were able to do. And, but yeah, it seemed like, I kept saying to myself, I was like, I'm so happy to be here. But then like, it felt like death by 1,000 little cuts of just kind of like, we're doing it. Try and stay positive as best as possible. And so it was nice. There's my cat, Duchess. It was nice to, when we finally could get in person, to get back to the work. And, it was still kind of hard with all the variables of being masked and being outside and what the weather was doing at the time. But, getting back to the play was really cool, and really taking on that challenge of what about this man needs to change. Because the only thing, I think the whole purpose of it is, if it's the same Bottom after meeting Titania, then what's the point? something about this fairy goddess creature being is the only thing that can transform him, or that experience. So yeah, it was really cool. And like the one thing about it that was funny is that because we were outside, because of the nature of the elements, because of the nature of how our canopy was, the one thing I kind of threw away was subtlety. I don't think there was much room for it. It was interesting to kind of see a trailer for the production that they did in England, where I guess their bottom and I guess Oberon ended up falling in love in that particular one. And it was interesting to kind of watch their trailer and just like, subtlety. I missed that. But it was hard because like the space was big. Sound disappears, even though we're mic'd, and we have audience on both sides. So there's aspects of the show that we have to play here and we have to keep moving. And, that sort of energy, or for the live experience is great. I think it's a little harder to capture on film, but at the end of the day, I think for a first journey back on stage, it was a lot of fun to step into that part, to bring theater back to Stratford and open the Tom Patterson parking lot.
It was so good. I didn't get a chance to see, unfortunately, Dream in person, but I just recently saw Serving Elizabeth and I Am William there. And I totally get what you're saying about the canopy. It is a lovely space that they concocted, but I noticed this especially with Serving Elizabeth. It was quite a windy afternoon when I went. And when the panels of the tent hit the wind, it's a large noise. And like being a performer, I guess like thinking like when you're in a theater space, obviously there's sound tracks, there's like coughing of the audience, there's stuff that you just are kind of listening out for and just kind of letting hit you and go. But this sort of wind effect was so rigorous and such a loud noise that like I was sitting there, I was like, okay, it's now kind of becoming part of the show.
Right.
And like, it was interesting. I was like, oh, go wind, because honestly, it would happen in like the peaks and dips of what the characters were experiencing. Like it was the one scene where there was like a lot of confrontation happening on stage, and it was actually the windiest part of the afternoon. And I was like, that's really neat, because it's like adding sort of like the climate, right? Like pathetic fallacy to what's happening.
Yeah.
But I would imagine, like, I totally could imagine, like, that's just one other thing to kind of sort of thread into your character work or your journey on a stage like that, because it's hard to ignore. And and I like what you say about like subtlety kind of goes out the window, because I think people have been like aware. It's so interesting, like coming back in person. I think people know that it's kind of, we're starting back again in person. So it's not that there's wiggle room per se, but I think there's like almost like an awareness of we're all in this together, trying to do this thing again. And so I just find that it's great. It's almost like, to me, it would be like an extra playground element for the actor to be like, well, you know what? If we're out in open air, then like I'm going to take advantage of this and shake things up a little and make things bigger, make things louder. Because,
Right.
Like
well,
you said,
a question for you. What time of day did you see it?
So I saw Serving Elizabeth the 11:30, so like the lunchtime one, 11:30 a.m. Mm-hmm.
And you say you saw two shows.
And then I saw I'm William, the 8 p.m. one.
Okay. So we didn't have Dream 2, like I guess our times were 3 or 11, 3, and 7. But it's so interesting. Like we didn't have too many of the 7 p.m. shows. the difference of what the Stratford sort of white noise is, 11, 3 o'clock, very noisy. You hear the streets, you hear the ducks, you hear the lawnmowers, you hear cars, you hear people walking down by the water. The 7 p.m. hits. Not many people are driving around. The atmosphere outside gets quiet. As the show goes on, you actually get a sense of your lighting design, maybe for the first time. So like it was interesting to like we only had I think a couple of 7 p.m. shows, but we had I think right before we filmed our show, we had a 7 p.m. and I think that was probably our most magical performance. Because the energy is different. I think people have had their dinner. The day is, for the most part, done. And this is the last thing we're going to do. We're going to go watch a little show and have some fun and enjoy ourselves. And the town quieted down and the lights came up. And yeah, it's interesting because like with the audience being socially distanced, like usually when you're in a theater, I keep hearing voice teachers or coaches saying, in a theater, the audience will breathe as one. And in our particular formation this past summer, the breathing as one was different. You're breathing as one in your own little pod of either 1 to 4. Because everybody's so spaced out. So it's a different sort of like a rolling effect. I don't know if rolling is the right word, but it's just the energy is different. Yeah. We can see the audience. You can see their faces. You can see that they're with you, but it's a different thing as opposed to being side by side, like complete strangers and feeling the collective. Yeah. The energy of the collective was just different than what you would normally get in a theater. So I'm not saying it was bad, it was just different. So it's just one of those things having to clock for ourselves and just saying they're there. They're just there in a different sort of a way than we're usually used to.
To me, like I'm curious what your thought of this is, because like I know that's something we totally forget about, is the audience sort of existing as this one unit traditionally, usually underneath the same theater roof, right? And basically the only thing separating us from the audience is the stage, the front of the stage, right? But we're all kind of in a shared experience. So I didn't even think about that of sort of as the artist, as the performer, instead of looking out and seeing this unit and sort of like a sea of heads together, there are like gaps. And to me, like, I don't know, when I perform, there's always something in the back, and this is probably just like the people pleaser giver in me. Like there's something in the back of my head that's always like, it's not like, it's always like, I'm doing this for the audience. Like I'm doing this, I'm a vehicle for that. Yeah. So I didn't even think about that, but seeing those gaps and stuff, did that impact your performance? Like did you, like, to me, I would feel like I would, that sort of back of my head would be magnified, because it would be like, even more so, I need to sort of thread this together. For them, well, I don't know.
Well, no, it was interesting in the sense where I say it's different, and sometimes with the big collective, you kind of like, oh, the audience is great tonight, or what the hell is wrong with the audience? Right. But what was interesting is that because we never really left the stage in Dream, I had a moment where Oberon is right in front of me on our box, our caravan box, if you will, talking to Puck or getting his plan ready to put the love juice into Tanya's eyes. So I'm behind him, crouching down, doing some Foley or waiting to do some Foley. But at that time, I could look to either side and see the audience. And it was in those moments, it was just kind of like, okay, they are there.
Right.
just, instead of like big bellowing laughs, they're just kind of like, hey, that was cool, like to their neighbor right beside them, and just little smiles of delight.
Right.
And yeah, so it was just different. It was just a more maybe reserved, or how do we do this again sort of energy. So it was they were there. They were just there in a different sense of, how we had all left theater, I guess, at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah. Crazy. It is crazy how the space has sort of like adapted itself. I think there's going to be so much literature coming out of this sort of segue phase of going from everyday, quote unquote, like I don't want to say normalcy, that's not the word, but just like the routine of what live theater was perceived to be, into lockdown, and then thrown back into the space. And obviously we can't ignore that there was a chunk that was missing. So it's clearly generates great discussion. And everyone's experience has been a little bit different too. That's why I love asking and talking about this conversation. I think it's important we talk about it too, especially because it is so difficult to kind of jumpstart ourselves. And I think it's healthy for folks to talk through it, talk about it. And everyone's experience has been so different. So speaking of that sort of halting period, that lockdown period, I think a lot of us sort of, to stay as immersed as we could in the industry, wore different hats or went back to old hats that we did wear, and just sort of created how we could. And you pumped out a really interesting, lovely web series, Private Idiots, where you produced, wrote, and starred in. So tell us more about that project. Like, what was that experience like? Origin story, content,
That beast was a bit of a three-headed monster, where it was myself and two other creators, Oliver Ward and Dennis Nicholson. It's like those guys, I guess, are really the driving force behind it. And they are. So Oliver is the one who initially created this concept of these two guys in the car. And I think these are two old characters of ours that we've done years back. So I think our first time doing it was maybe 10 years ago as like a 3-minute short, which was called Sensitivity Training. And then a couple years after that, we did Sensitivity Training 2 with a little bit, I think that one was like about a 10-minute short. And the nature of it was, and at that time, Oliver was the one who was writing all of them. And so I guess the last time we really touched it before Private Idiots was 2013. So it was like right before my son was born, and then life got busy, and Oliver moved up to Huntsville, and he's been doing a lot of things up there. Dennis is a very active sound guy. He was one of the sound guys on Kim's Convenience, and he just finished up working on The Boys. So yeah, and then I think it was around that time that I got into the Shawfest for the first time. So we all kind of like went this way, and over the years, like, yeah, let's get the band back together. Let's get them back together. And and the way it worked out was, 2020 started, and then I think, if I recall correctly, I think soon after the George Floyd murder, Oliver reached out to me and he's like, hey man, I think it's time maybe to get these guys back together, get back in the car and get them working on some cases. And this is him saying he'd started writing a couple of episodes, but one of the things that he was really aware of now is that he was writing my voice without having any insight from me.
Right.
And so he's like, and especially with the way of the world right now, I think I really want to, you know, a lot of what these guys do are maybe get some things wrong, very wrong, but you know, they're battling ideas out, and I think he wanted to get Steve's voice downright. So yeah, so you know, that's what started the initial plot back, or the initial idea of getting us back together. And Dennis is the one who has directed on the first sensitivity training. He was just I think he was just a sound guy then, but then for the second sensitivity training, he was our sound guy and director. And so coming back, we over 2020, or mid 2020, we created a writer's room, and between the three of us, and you know, pitched a bunch of ideas here, a bunch of things that are happening throughout the year that we can comment on and write on. And you know, and at that time I wasn't writing anything, and the idea of, you know, do we comment on the George Floyd murder, or do we skip over it? And as we got to it, I was like, I think I want to speak on that one. And yeah, so them giving me the opportunity to really put my voice on that was cool. And you know, it's also pushing a line. It's like the one thing I was very aware of was like, I don't want to make fun of the situation. I just want to point out the underlying frustration that is bubbling up inside of some people right now. Yeah. And while at the same time being able to have a release of humor. Mm-hmm. And then Karen Contagion was also the one that I wrote too. So it was nice to have two back to back to kind of like build on the story and kind of put my voice in. And I think those two guys have had a little bit more experience in the writing field. And, you know, I think it was just a cool opportunity to hear what as going back to the bottom, what their journey was, how we started the show, and where we were ending off at episode 9. And yeah, so it was really cool. And like, it was my saving grace of 2020, because, you know, I was supposed to be at Stratford that year doing Much Ado Hamlet, and my big one last year would have been Wolf Hall. And yeah, once it went away, I'm like, well, what the hell do I do now? And then, you know, trying to figure out how to reach out in a world that is like just screaming at each other with not much listening. Yeah. And the one thing I think we were able to do is, despite what our opinions were, I think these two guys at the end of the day were able to listen to each other, and somehow continue on, as opposed to, you're cut off, that's it, I'm not talking to you anymore. You know, it's maybe it's just because of the job, but you know, the ability of just kind of like, you know, your idea is a little bit far-fetched, but I don't know, they're able to listen and talk and have a dialogue and maybe have a little bit of growth. And yeah, so like that was such a treat to do. And, you know, self-produced, and like hats off to Oliver and Dennis, because those guys are like technical geniuses in regards to how you shoot. And like I said, Dennis is a sound guy. He was also the director, and like all of our shoots consisted of in total, unless it was our last episode, of 4 people. Me and Oliver in the car, Dennis outside with his sound gear, and then we had a DOP on site. So there's 4 people.
Right.
For like all episodes except for episode 9, where Vienna Dr. Lynn steps into the car. But yeah, so it was a lot of dialogue. It was a lot of talking. So like that was pardon?
Without spoiling because folks can check this out on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah. Without spoiling the whole plot. But I mean, and maybe this is giving away a little, but it all happens within a car, like these conversations. So when I was about on episode 3, I watched the series, and the idea of them being in a confined space, talking to each other and having these sort of big discussions and listening or not listening. Again, it was obviously what they were talking about was resonant of what is going on in our world today. But the fact that it's in a confined space added another layer, because we were all in lockdown in our houses, and forced to be in conversation in situations that are maybe uncomfortable, or if you're locked down with your families, and you start mixing views, you start discussing certain things, and one person says another thing, another person says the other thing, and then there's your conversation, and it's not like you can go anywhere because you're under the same roof. And so that was very so like the setting, the atmosphere of what was going on too was exactly mimicking, I think, what a lot of folks were feeling. So check it out on YouTube, everyone. It's definitely something to, and oh my gosh, only 4 of you on set, like, whew.
Well, I think we generally did about 2 episodes a night. So that would be like roughly around 20 pages of dialogue that we try and get out. So we do the first one and just take a break and just like, okay, let's run lines for the next one. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think, well, we have the hope to do more, and find a way for these 2 guys to get out of the car to kind of like blow up the world a little bit more, and yeah, so we'll see where Steve and Boise land in the future.
I'm excited to see how it goes. Nice. Okay, so we talked about recent liveness. We talked about the mediatization that sort of became our focal point over the last year or so. So I'm going to take us back even more, cycling us back to Stratford, your experience with the stage. So you've done several seasons at the Stratford Festival, and while we're on the topic of repertory theatre, you've also done several seasons, as you've mentioned, with the Shaw Festival. So what has your experience been like at these 2 sort of landmark Canadian theatre institutions?
Great. Like it's again about the journey, right? They're kind of like apples and oranges, or if you're of the Caribbean descent, I call it pineapples and mangoes. I like those 2 very much. So they're amazing places to work, right? Stratford is a larger machine. I call them both machines. A larger machine with the size of the stages, the festival, Avon, and then the Patterson, being around 500-600 people, and then the studio. Shaw, they have their festival stage, which I think holds about 1,200 people, maybe about that. And then the Royal George, which is maybe about 300. And then they had the courthouse, which was about the same size, but they've lost that one as of a couple of years ago. And this Jackie Maxwell studio, which is about, around the same size. So they have, two stages now that are about the same capacity size, but different styles. So you have the festival stage, which is proscenium, the Royal George, which is a smaller sort of vaudeville type proscenium style stage. And then the studio, which is pretty flexible, but I guess over the past couple of years, they've just kind of kept it in the round. But yeah, it's they're just different beasts, as we're talking from Shakespeare to Shaw. The way in which those two playwrights take on dialogue is very different. Different and similar. Different in, I guess, Shaw in the use of prose, Shakespeare in the way of verse. And, but also at the same time, the thought processes are very long and big. They just have, I guess, a slightly different attack on it. Yeah, I feel like Shakespeare is a lot of this. Shaw is a lot of this.
Yeah.
But the one thing for me, I guess, in regards to the Shaw Festival, the plays that I've done there haven't really been a lot about this. It's, well, yes, there's a lot of, I'm just saying the plays that I've done have been a lot about the heart. Like going back to my first season was the Intelligent Homosexuals Guide to Capitalism and Socialism with the Key to the Scriptures, Tony Kushner, with a 3.5-hour play. And then my second season was Master Harold and the Boys and the Adventures of a Black Girl in Search of God. And then the next season was Madness of King George and An Octoroon. So, like, those 3 years in general were pretty intense in regards to what was being asked. But yeah, I think the nature of the Shaw's plays in general, I find them very ensemble based. And so there is a lot of, and like I may have mentioned before that, like, I always come back to sports. So sports is a team thing, as far as the sports that I've played. So you need your teammates, and a lot of the Shaw plays, you have a big cast, but there's a lot of dialogue going on with a lot of different people. Shakespeare, the same thing, but sometimes with title character play, your main focus is that person. So, I find just the nature of how the plays that Shaw are dealt with are very company based, and sometimes the Shakespeare's we're looking at this one person and following that journey with a support of other people. But like I as I say, going back to sports, I always try and come back to the team mentality of how we take on the plays. And yeah, so it's I'd say apples and oranges, pineapples and mangoes. They're two big machines. One slightly smaller, but I've had nothing but a good time working at both of them. I guess over the past couple of years. My first couple of years in Stratford were a little bit more frustrating because I was dying to be seen, and I was there for 4 years, from like 2005 to 2009, and then wasn't. So I left and came to Toronto and hustled hard, and then, as I said, like, sensitivity training was up in the mix of that. Kim's Convenience was up in the mix of that. Doing some stuff at Soul Pepper and Obsidian, and kind of all over the place, leading my way to the Shaw Festival, I guess, in 2015-ish, I guess, around, to about now, where trying to figure out what's happening next year, and I'm not sure yet. So, but yeah, they're amazing places to work. Given, the depending on what you want. If for me now, where I am now is like, what is it? Is there a nice challenge? I'm all about the challenge right now. It's just kind of like, what are the plays that scare me? Octoroon terrified me. Master Harold and the Boys terrified me because I knew there was a huge cost to it. And it's going to require something of you to step into it and take it on, as opposed to, if you see a show, you'd be like, okay, that person went there, or they didn't take it on. And we know it when we see it. And yeah, I guess going back to, for me, like for I played rugby, so I was a guy who was an enforcer. I was a hard hitter, and so that sort of instinctual sort of playing on the field is kind of what I want to bring onto the stage when I can. And so if there's opportunities like that, I generally don't want to shy away from it. I want to find a way to take it on, and yeah, I don't know, because I think that's why we go to the theater, is to see people do crazy things, so that we don't have to do them in real life, or learn from those particular impulses. How do you overcome? And yeah, I don't know. I think for me, the theater has so much potential of what it can do for an audience. I think it is there to make the world a better place, to entertain, but I think there is something about it that can be cathartic, as we come back to that word that we learn in theater school.
Yeah.
Catharsis.
Well, yeah. Speaking to an Octoroon, Master Harold, how I first saw you in the audience was at Master Harold and the Boys, and in Black Girl. That was the summer, my program, University of Toronto, Mississauga, and Sheridan College, their theater and drama studies program. We have a Shaw intensive course, which is like 2 weeks. And we go to the festival, we see what shows are on, and alongside that, Professor Lawrence Switsky, he lectures about the plays, or about the histories of the plays, of the playwrights, of the social matters that the plays were written in, and how possibly they're being adapted to today or put under scrutiny to today. Such a fascinating course, and I felt so honored to have the opportunity to do that. And that was in between second year and third year of me, and pretty much with theater too, but with any other program in university, it's usually like between second year and third year, you're kind of in that period of, do I want to switch my major? Am I on the right path? Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have that, but there was a part of me that was like, okay, is this really something that I want to do? Like, do I want to stay in the industry, want to stay in the arts? And then I went to the Shaw course, and I was like, I'm home. Like, this is my heart and soul and mind are all in one place. Like, the right place, right time, everything. Yes. And that season was delicious. Like, there were so many awesome, fantastic works on stage that season. And Master Harold, like, you're so right. That was definitely a piece of yours, and of James and Alan's too. I think of, like, holy cow, like, and watching it as like a theater practitioner too, it was like, it isn't just the character. It was like seeing you folks like have to do the things that you did on stage as the actor. Like, I have like empathy, sympathy for that. Like, I find that sometimes when I'm watching works and the stuff on stage is so visceral, or so, like you say, heart driven.
Yeah.
I get even, it's like emotional of what I'm watching, but emotions times 1,000, because it's like, what the actors as a team sort of produce and have to
Right.
show, and it's so, but it's needed, and it's lovely. I remember we had like a brief talk back with you all too, and just to hear like the chemistry that the three of you had on that for that particular performance was beautiful to hear and learn about, because that piece in particular is so needed, and it was an educational tool, absolutely, and just yes, I'm like, theater for a purpose, theater for, taking old works, putting them, and Fugard isn't terribly old, but just, like, how do we take, right? Like, how do we take stuff even that's several decades from now and put it on stage? And then I saw an Octoroon, because I was following you and James and Alan, and I want to know what these people are doing. Wow, that piece is, I almost like, I don't wish it was filmed, because it was one of those, like, you had to be there.
Yeah.
But I almost don't want it to be happening like that exact installment again, because then I think that there's something about being in the audience live, like with a heartbeat, watching what you all did for an Octoroon. That was, again, like, so sorry, I had to share mine, because I was in the audience. I happened to be in the audience for both of those performances where you're like, that was full on heart thing, and absolutely, but yeah, it was. I was watching, like, this is what we do. Like, this is art on stage. There's so many layers. There's so much to sort of learn, to unlearn, to teach, to feel.
Yeah.
So, I had to just.
And those two shows especially, I feel like their aim is exactly the same. One has, like, Master Heralded and Boys is a play written by a white man in order to trick his white counterparts in South Africa into seeing these two black men as humans. And it does that. And it was banned. An Octoroon, an adaptation of a classical American play, The Octoroon, wasn't trying to trick anybody, just had a lot more frustration and anger, and with, as we're watching a show where your audience is always looking for that person on stage that they can connect to and just be like, okay, he or she is my safe place. And I don't think they can necessarily find that, because what would have been the hero is now me, a black person with a white mask, playing both the hero and the villain. And the only white person on stage is there's Dora, the neighboring slave owner woman who is trying to marry the hero of the play, or get a grasp on him. And the original playwright, Dion Boucicault, who has now gone into Redface to play a native Indian, and now he doesn't speak English. So people are left, like the audience, and this is why I love Brendan Jacobs-Jenkins, is he puts the experience on the audience. So there's no sitting back and relaxing, just kind of like, oh, this is a nice show. It's, you're put in the hot seat from the beginning, and you're there for about 2.5 hours, stewing in your own sort of uncomfortability of how you deal with society. And it's a big ask, and you're confronted with a lot. There's a lot of images that are thrown at you, and like, me and Whiteface, Ryan Cunningham, who's an indigenous actor, is in blackface playing the black slaves, and then Patrick McGannis, who is in redface playing Wanoti, the native Indian in the play, and also a sunburnt auctioneer later on the play, auctioning off slaves off of an auction block. So what it's doing to you, the audience, is as I say, cathartic, right? Because there's no escape. Where's the fourth wall in that show? I don't think there really is one, because we're talking directly to you. But with the same sort of aim of, as we're discovering in the world how much photography has changed and what it can do in regards to justice or not. You can record a killing. Yeah. And in this particular play, the end result is we've caught the murderer on tape or on camera. And then the play's done because we know who did the wrong thing. But now that's not necessarily the case. We see it, but because what we see isn't necessarily the case, even though we see it frame by frame, second to second.
An image is flooding back into my brain of one of the big monologues you did downstage, and the background behind you was the projection. And it was like seeing you and then have the projection of the noosed individual behind you.
Yeah.
And that, that's, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And adding that layer, right? And what does it mean when you see something and you hear something, or something that's in front of your face? What do you believe, right? The thing that's in front of your face.
Yeah.
Or is it any different? There was so much that piece.
Yeah.
That piece conjured, did. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because like the whole nature of that photo is a fact. Mm-hmm. That particular overhead projector photo moment wasn't something recreated. It's an actual photo from history. It's a fact. This happened. There was a crowd of white people at a lynching of these two black men. And here we are today talking about if we can use facts to prove things. We're in a very strange place where I don't know how you argue things if facts aren't a part of the equation.
Yeah. Look at that. I feel like we're using that piece even to talk about the pandemic climate right now too.
Yeah. Stop fact checking.
Yeah.
What? 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 Yeah. Anyways, let's keep going. But yeah, so it was like that whole, those two shows were such a treat to do, and doing an octoroon very much helped lead to the next year where I did Coriolanus, going back to Stratford since 2009. So for any way to return back to Stratford to do that show in that particular way was such a treat. Such a treat.
Course, yeah. That was lovely too. And talk about visuals too. The visuals with that piece was super neat. And kind of looking back in it, like ominously foreshadowing the blending of mediums, because Lepage sort of did it in a cinematic way, but yet you're watching it in the audience. So and little did we know we kind of would have to turn that direction as the years went on.
Yeah.
But also such a spectacular piece too. Yeah, so just touching on a little bit, I mean, we talked a lot about Shaw and Stratford, but you had peppered in earlier, peppered, no pun intended. You have also done stuff with Soul Pepper and Obsidian and Crows. I guess just briefly touching on that, like what has that experience been like in smaller sort of companies?
Um, well, my work with Obsidian has been mainly solely with Philip Aiken. So like trying to think back, was Master Harold was the last time I worked with him.
Okay.
I've worked with him since.
That was sort of like a sister production with Obsidian and Shaw, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I feel like, oh gosh. Well, there's one particular play that I can recall right now doing with Obsidian. Oh, there it is. Gosh, I don't know where my brain just went. Yes, okay. So going back to just leaving Stratford, soon after that, my first show I did with Philip was Ruined, Lynn Nottage's play Ruined. And then a couple years later, we did Shakespeare's Nigga, written by Joseph Jomo Pierre, and that led up to Master Harold and the Boys. And like one of the pitches, so that I could play Sam, talking to Jackie, saying, working with Philip, he will not let me get away with anything. So I think, being ballsy enough to just be like, hey, I think it's going to work out for everybody. It's going to be hard on me, but you're going to get the results you want. So I like working with Philip. I find like I've learned so much from him, and it's a lot of the things that I guess I do now have been implemented, or all those sort of seeds have been planted from his sort of philosophy on how you take on a part or take on a play and finding your whole sort of journey. So I appreciate that man so very much. And working with other companies in town, like, working with Soul Pepper at the time has been cool. And like, well, a lot of that was mainly Kim's Convenience. And, Kim started off at the Fringe, and then when it got picked up, I was able to go on tour with it, and coming back to Crows, I'm just trying to think. It was interesting because I was set to do Julius Caesar with Chris Abrams, and then do Much Ado About Nothing right after at Stratford. So it was interesting to get in the room with Chris and see his style of working and really tearing Shakespeare apart, and just kind of, let's give it a new sort of a vibe, because we can. Why not? And some people loved it, some people didn't, and I'm not against that. I'm all for being ballsy and taking a shot at blowing things up. And I think with our Julius Caesar, it was cool. It was cool, and it was a nice opportunity to give people some more insight into the world around the time of Julius Caesar, because we just kind of start off the play and it's like, what's wrong with Caesar? Why is it so bad that he wants to be in charge? Or what's the history behind that? And finding a link to Coriolanus. So there was after playing Coriolanus, I was able to kind of slip back in as Casca, and with an essence as a different character of Coriolanus, speaking on the past of Rome leading up to where we were. So it was cool. It was cool to get a chance to work with Chris, and and I think that particular opportunity helped lead to something coming up in the future in regards to Gloria, which we can talk about a little later, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just to touch on what you just said too, and I really appreciate you saying this coming from you. The idea of like not being afraid to sort of push back boundaries or like explode and approach something without feeling squelched. I think unfortunately sometimes in the industry, like you think like you're in a box or there's something that's expected, and that can sometimes rub off on like as on you on someone as like the artist of and you sort of train your brain to follow that versus like, so it's kind of tampering down what you could have to offer as an artist. And I think unfortunately for various reasons, like that sort of like that's can sort of pressure can take away from what the experience could be like from the artist. So I think, like giving yourself the permission to explore and explode and be yourself on stage. I think a lot of people throughout their whole career could use that sort of reminder, because I even like myself breaking through, I do find I'm like not expressing myself fully, all corners of myself, because I think I'm not supposed to, or I shouldn't. And that's just like, I think that's that odd balance of like art as sort of like art as the career and also art as the expression, and sort of like marrying those two is hard. Sometimes. So I feel like this is a beautiful segue to the next section, because we kind of got a bit more personal. And so on a more personal level, so I've seen on social media, and you just mentioned your son just a second ago too, you're very active in your children's lives. And for anyone who knows me, and probably our viewers by this time, kids and children like hold a special place in my heart, and I've had the opportunity to do a lot of TYA stuff, and I have a little niece and nephew that are my pride and joy. So I personally don't have any of my own yet, but I know in the future sometime I would love to do that too. And so I love seeing artists who are doing the thing and then also have a family as well, and seeing that balance and that navigating of both of those spheres. But what is it like being a father in the industry? Because
it's not easy. It's not easy. They're great. I have two. So I have Rian, who is 8, and Naya, who is 5. So they're back at school now. Last year they weren't in school at all. Well, they were in school remotely at home downstairs. But you know, it's been interesting, because I guess the past, let's say Rian is 8 now. So when he was born, we were in Toronto, and then Shaw happened, and I was at the Shaw Festival for 3 years, and then things started getting complicated with, you know, the Coriolanus offer happening, and which was like chance of a lifetime. So it was like, okay, we gotta go. And at the time, we didn't have a home base. So, well, I guess our home base beforehand was in Toronto, and then going to Shaw, where they have accommodations. So we stayed there, and so you know, you're kind of living like a nomad for a little bit. And he hadn't started school yet until a few years later. But I guess was it Coriolanus year that he started? I'm trying to think back. Yeah, okay, so when we went to go to Stratford, and then he had started junior kindergarten in Stratford. Or did he start? I'm losing my years. They started at Niagara Lake, and then we had to go to Stratford, and then after the Coriolanus nothing was happening at Stratford that particular following year. So we went back to Shaw and did Glass Menagerie and Sex. And then after that, getting an offer to go back for the 2020 season for what I had mentioned earlier on. So it's just kind of like bouncing all around.
Yeah.
What the hell do we do?
You were sort of getting all of the sort of momentum, and alongside that, your son was starting pivotal years of school and stuff.
Yeah, so it was hard, and now we have home base. We're in Hamilton now, and the aim is whatever happens, they stay here and I bounce around. So it's the one thing I've been saying over the years. It's a hustle. The industry is a hustle. And now the hustle is just fourfold, 4 times more, because there's not just providing for myself. There's my son, daughter, and my wife, and so it's I'm trying my best as I can, and it's day to day, and I try as much as best I can to plan forward as I can, but over the past year where theater has been gone, that's why Private Idiots came out, or one of those, as I say, was one of those things that kind of saved me creatively, but was also part of the hustle too. And, trying to think ahead of like, what are the next steps involved, auditioning like crazy for film and TV. And this past year, I guess one of the other saving graces has been booking some voice work for the first time. So I was able to do some animation work where I play can't call him a goldfish if he's green. He's a fish who's green. And this other one called Summer Memories, where I play this character by the name of Tiny Lewis, who's a little cool kid who has glasses and spiky hair, and he has my voice. So,
oh my gosh, I love
this. So tapping into that world for the first time, and I guess all that sort of stuff will come out in the new year. But like, missing acting, so getting up to Stratford to do Bottom was amazing, and doing Private Idiots amazing as well, because you're doing it as much as possible. But the film and TV industry has been interesting and frustrating for me at the same time, where I think because I have so much theater on my resume, now that I just turned 39, so I'm about to be 40, and I have a little salt and peppery action going on. I don't know, like it's I've come close a lot over the past year and a bit with TV things, and just like, it's you and another guy, and I don't know, losing out on what I feel like is the experience of my I won't say lack of experience behind the camera, lack of experience in the mainstream camera world of film and TV. But I just want to play.
The mediums operate so different. Like with theater, it's like you play the character. With film, you are the character too, right? And I think that's something that like non-actors don't really realize, is that like as actors, it takes like a different mindset to kind of approach behind the screen and on the stage.
Well, and I guess the scale is different, right? So, like on stage, you have a big voice, but trying to find how to. Well, sometimes I feel like a lot of acting on TV is a lot of whispering.
Right. Like the green goldfish coming in with Coriolanus energy is a little too much for this fish.
Put that into a whisper. So yeah, I guess taking some time, taking some classes, and working with some people who have worked a lot in the film industry, just to kind of like help. Now I won't say scale it down, but put it in the right sort of. Yeah, scaling it down is a good way of putting it, because like a lot of the time it's just like I'm speaking to you, and right now I'm pretty close to my camera, and I'm not pretending like there's anybody else beyond us. Right? It's a private moment between myself and you. You know, and then it's as opposed to filling the room or including anybody else, because it's not about that. Right. It's about everything right here. As far as I know.
Totally.
We're trying to figure out. But yeah, like going back to family, it's a hustle, right? So the need to provide is always kind of like at the back of my head, just kind of like, hey, do your best work. And it'll pay off. So I'm trying to continue to be gentle with myself and say,
so important.
You've done great additions, you know. So, and it's just weird of just kind of like sending it out to the ether and hoping for a response. It's I think that part of it right now is the hardest part of it, is just kind of like, anything. Anything. But you know, just gotta stay positive, keep going, and keep doing it. And you know, one thing I say is like, you can wait for the phone to ring, or you can be proactive and start creating things. So I feel like that was one thing that helped me last year. I'm trying to think of other ways of being proactive for myself, of getting back to maybe doing some more writing and creating, and as I say, diversifying the portfolio as I'm stepping into the directing world in the new year. And I guess in the new year and right now, because all that preliminary work is being done now, of talking with designers and getting things in order. But I don't know, you just gotta keep moving as best as possible.
And like you said, being kind to yourself throughout, I think, again, just like as an overlying message to all actors.
Easier said than done, but like
easier said than done. But I'm of the firm thing, like, again, if you talk about it or you say that you're going to do it, like the chances are you're probably going to do something positive towards doing it.
Yeah.
Because I feel that, like, it's so hard, and we do have the blinders on of like, I need this, I need to do this, or the pressures come into play. But it's like, okay, also when we are playing and we are doing things, it takes a lot of energy, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. And then throw on sort of everyday, like normal life tasks, such as family stuff, or even doing the laundry, or like baking a meal, you know, checking in with others. It's so hard to forget that. And I think it's just, again, it's easier said than done, but just remembering that, because it's very difficult, this work we do, and taxing. And I think it can have the potential to consume if you're not careful, right? So yes. But okay, you kind of already we already sort of swam toward, I'll go with the green goldfish, swam towards the next question of, do you have any projects that are on the go or upcoming? And if so, what are they, and where can we keep up with you? So you sort of mentioned you're in the preliminary phases of January project.
We'll start rehearsals in February, and what that is I will be directing Brandon Jacobs-Jenkins' Gloria at Crows. It's a production with ARC, which was formerly known as the Actors Repertory Company, but we just changed it to ARC because I don't think we've ever actually done repertory. So I think it made more sense. But yeah, so ARC in association with Crows, and yeah, we have our amazing company of actors coming into the mix to bring this particular show to Toronto. And it's interesting for as we're talking about Brandon Jacobs-Jenkins play. His name is such a mouthful. An octoroon of where it is very in your face, like no fourth wall, and Gloria kind of goes back to your traditional sort of sense of theater, of where you think you're protected by the fourth wall, but the content is still very much on you, the audience. So I look forward to it. And I think it has a lot to say about how we as a society deal with things, how we deal with each other, how we talk to each other, and how we treat each other. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And there's some hard things in it, but there's some hard things about the world right now that we're either dealing with or ignoring. But yeah, I'm looking forward to bringing it to the city with our company of great actors and artists and the team behind it. I'm grateful for Crows for jumping behind us to use their space to bring this Canadian premiere. So I'm really excited. Really excited to step into it for the first time as a director.
Is this your directorial debut too?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so exciting.
For me, it's always been
February.
And March 1st we start previews, and I think we open March 4th. I think it's about like a 3-week run. Okay. But yeah, like I guess this is the first play that like I've wanted to direct before, but the actor in me is like, if there's a part in there for me, I'm going to play it. So finding a play is like, okay, there isn't a part in there for me, but I love the play just as much that I want to put my sort of stamp on it. And yeah, so I'm excited. I'm excited to get in there and play and take on these hard challenges. And as I say, you got to step up and get dirty sometimes. But that's, so if that's for us to do, so I guess the audience doesn't have to, right? And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting in there and playing.
Mm-hmm. The audience doesn't have to, but possibly inspired or impacted to do as well.
Like, do some work around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's so exciting. Well, yeah, we'll definitely keep our eyes peeled as that sort of advertisements start going out for that. And so looking forward to that. And just to kind of let our viewers, listeners know, Midsummer Night's Dream is going to be released, or has been released to Stratfest Live at Home. And we will be doing a panel reviewing that down the line too, and there might be a special guest on that panel coming down the line. But yeah, so folks can definitely access to see your work is bottom in that. And obviously, as we said, with YouTube, Private Idiots, check it out. The whole series you can stream right there. And then, keep our eyes peeled for more André Sills works behind the table or on the stage. Great. So are there any social media like handles or any other project plugs you'd like to today?
Well, I guess yeah, as you mentioned, Dream on Stratfest at Home, Private Idiots, the whole series is about 9 episodes. Yeah, 45 minutes you can blast through blast through all 9 episodes. And yeah, keep your eye out for Gloria in the new year. And yeah, summer memories, and there'll be my little green fish. I don't know if I can quite say what the show is as of yet, but because there isn't a proper title, it's still kind of like code name title. But yeah, looking forward to that getting out in the new year too, where I've actually had to do some singing / rapping, which I normally don't do. That's why I think we led more towards the rapping style of to find my flow. But yeah, looking forward towards the new year, and I think me, Oliver, and Dennis are going to try and do some more stuff with Private Idiots. So keep your eyes peeled, and we'll see what 2022 holds.
Yeah, lots of things in the mix, lots of things upcoming, different hats. Love it. Like keeping things just creative and any path. Great. And where can folks follow you?
I'm on Instagram, DRE373, on Twitter, André Sills 373. Yes, that's the main places to check me out: Twitter and Instagram. I am on, TikTok, but I haven't really done anything on there.
I also haven't broken to so many people have told me I should, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet because something tells me
I'm not going to have time to be editing videos, and that's a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Andre, for being here with us today. I know I have so enjoyed the time that we've spent now and talked about every sort of nook and cranny of the industry and of the artistry, and just knowing that you are like flooding our stages today, and all of this conversation is very much happening today, is super beneficial to me, to our viewers, and I hope folks tune in and feel the same. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom with us today.
My pleasure.
So as always, folks, you can follow me on my artist account, Jillian.Robinson96, and with Cup of Hemlock. Be sure to follow our social media, so Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where if you're watching this today, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and then if you're listening to us today via our podcast, don't forget to subscribe there too. So that is it for today. Stay safe and healthy, everyone, and we will see you next time on The Cup. Cheers.